Wait a minute. This is not tier. We've already done that video. Welcome back to another live Q&A. I'm Mark Holthe, Canadian immigration lawyer, and I am not alone. No, I'm not. I have my fearless compadre here, Alicia, who's going to be joining in, and I'm going to pull her in a second here. Let's pull Alicia in to our live. There we go. How you doing, Alicia?
I'm well. I'm looking at some interesting cases with some of our other lawyers, so that's fun.
Ah, fun. I know Alicia and I have got some big things in the works on the foreign worker front that we had a little roundtable meeting within the firm. Things are ramping up in Canada and more companies are looking to hire foreign nationals. And so those who've been waiting for a long time, hoping that there's going to be job offers available and things like that. Well, things are pointing in that direction, aren't they, Alicia?
Yeah, there's definitely labor market needs, and so that's one of the things with TIER. And of course, the minister made a little announcement about the fact that there's new occupations that are now eligible for express entry, which means that we're going to be bringing in people in these sectors because they are required for local economies and for our ability to continue to provide services to many Canadians.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, let's see who we've got tuning in here. It's interesting when we do these lives with all of our, with all the different platforms that we're on. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And KC here says, "Oh, that's a tiny little message there. Don't know why that's so tiny there." KC says, "Video isn't working on LinkedIn." Well, I'm glad you're able to find us on YouTube. So we've got a bunch of different options here. Noman says that he is here as well. So over on Facebook, so we got a couple that are working, which is great. And those of you who are tuning in for the first time, this is your opportunity to give us a shout out. Let us know who's here, who's watching, and we'll get to the questions in just a little bit. So one of the things that we are actively working on as we go forward with the things that we're doing within the firm, I'm going to flip over my screen here and I'm going to also pull Alicia onto this one here. Alicia was working hard on another client matter. And so, so usually we have this all queued up before, but it's all good. We're now all set up. Okay. So on the firm, if you go to our firm website, I just want to remind everybody, and I know I talk about this a lot, but let's shrink this down just a little bit so that we got a little better view here. When you go to our firm website, and I'm also going to, this is a living, growing video here. There we go. Look what I can do on the fly. We can adjust this stuff. I want to point out just right at the beginning, for those who are tuning in to our live Q&A today, that lots of the things that we discuss here are also contained in the blogs on our firm website. So please go here. Check this out. There's a constant, steady stream of new blog posts and information on all kinds of different topics, including the ones that we do videos on. So we've got our live Q&A here on the YouTube channel. Cedric's coming up again with another live. And you can see we are releasing a bunch of new videos on a number of different topics, including NOx and web forms and, the changes to the international student rules and ways to immigrate to Canada. So if you haven't checked these out, please go over there and check them out, because these are short little videos that are packed full of helpful information in addition to everything that we're offering over here on our firm website. And also when it comes to just general information on all kinds of things from business immigration to family, to visiting Canada, working, studying, immigrating. We've got a ton of different information that's all available here for you on the website now. So this is a great place to check out for other content in addition to our live Q&As. So I
And
wanted to share that. Yes.
And Mark, I wanted to add, so if you go back to the blog and you go
Mm-hmm.
to the, should I list my spouse as an accompanying or non-accompanying family member? And it might even be on the second page of our articles, but this is a situation where we have a express entry applicant who is in a common law relationship or is married to a Canadian. And I think it might be on the second page.
The second page. Okay. Go to
Mhm,
older posts here, see if we can pull it up.
yeah. And it's confusing for people because they say, well, you know what, if I've come to Canada, there it is with the railway tracks with the people holding hands. Yeah. So should my spouse, if my spouse is a Canadian citizen or a permanent resident, should they be listed as accompanying or non-accompanying on my express entry profile? And this is a case where I wrote this article and I literally wrote this article for the person that I did
Mm-hmm.
this consult with. And unfortunately, they didn't see this article until after it had all gone wrong. And so this does happen. And so please read this article. If you are in a situation where you're an international student and you've come on a study permit and you did your PGWP and you got into a relationship with a Canadian citizen or PR and you've been common law and now you decide, well, I want to apply for express entry. The problem is if you list your spouse as an accompanying, and I can see where people get it wrong because they think, well, my spouse is in Canada, I'm in Canada, they're accompanying me. But according to the definition, the legal definition, they're not. And what happened in this case was this person had claimed those 15 CRS bonus points for the sibling, a Canadian sibling of their accompanying spouse. And unfortunately, you can't do that, right? If your spouse is already a Canadian citizen or a permanent resident, then they're not accompanying and you can't claim those 15 points. And so that made the difference in this case between the CRS cutoff and being below the CRS cutoff. And unfortunately, if you catch that mistake early, you can decline the ITA, make sure that you've corrected everything in your profile, explain what happened, and be able to do it if you do it properly. But in this case, the person had unfortunately already submitted a complete EAPR claiming those points incorrectly. And now, there's not a lot that can be done to try to fix the situation. And in fact, because it takes so long to get that application withdrawn, they might lose all their processing fees and they actually paid for their accompanying spouse. They thought their accompanying spouse, which you can't, right? If your spouse is already Canadian, it makes no sense to pay the fees. So, but now there are the processing fees. Now they're delayed. They can't create another express entry profile, even if they may have enough points now that the CRS are coming down. So we did do a video on this a while ago, but please go back and take a look at this if you are in a situation where you're in a relationship with a Canadian.
You bet. Thanks, Alicia. It's interesting, with a lot of the blog posts that we've done, there's a reason we create them, you guys. And often it's through the numerous consultations that we have with people. And when we see there are things that we could potentially share to help people avoid the problem that people get themselves into, then we try to do that. And one of the hardest parts, and I know Alicia, you're probably can echo what I'm going to say here, is to be in a consultation with someone who explains their problem to us, and they've gone so far down the path that there is nothing that we can do to help them. And I've seen this happen a lot recently, especially for people who are in the stages now where time is running out on work permits, or maybe they've done something in the past through the whole craziness of the pandemic and the subsequent years, where they made decisions that are probably going to cause problems with future applications, and they just don't know where to turn. The hardest thing is to be able to, to have these consults with them and then say, look, there's nothing that I can do to help you. I'm sorry. So the blog posts are designed to be proactive. They're designed to share information that can help you now. And even when I think about what we're doing with the, I'll just slide over here to one other page, the Canadian Immigration Institute and the courses that we have in here. These courses, no, they're not 100% comprehensive. That covers every possible situation that you yourself could have. These are literally here to help you avoid the most common mistakes people make and to educate you so that you know what you need to take care of and what you need to do now to make sure that you increase the chances of your success on your applications. And so the spousal sponsorship course is happening just literally on Monday. We're going to do that on the 21st. And the study permit course is one that I'm really excited about. And Alicia, this one here is really interesting because there are two different places that you can submit a study permit application. There's a special portal that's just for visitors and students, and it's a freaking gong show. Like, I went through it last night once again, because often we go through the GC key, through the IRCC secure account. That's where I tend to do the study permit applications. But that portal, which they can sometimes direct you to, it's woefully inadequate to prepare you guys to submit proper study permit applications. And it's scary. And I was going through it last night with Igor, and we were talking about the literally 3 or 4 different levels of checklists that you have to go through to make sure that you have everything. And I searched high and low, Alicia, and do you think I could find a statement of interest anywhere, like within the guides? It's like it's the most important part of the whole study permit application, and they're not even making it like transparent right from the beginning. And so all of these things, hopefully, we're going to be covering in the study permit course. And the card is open now for early registration for pre-sale. But I'm really looking forward to this one because, there's so many people going through here. And if you don't know what you're doing, if you haven't read through every single and scoured through every single piece of the process, you're doomed for failure. You really are. And then we've got the express entry, as always, coming up here and right after that, the following week on the 28th. So it's really, really interesting to see how this all plays out. Now, with that being said, I wanted to flip over here because on this we have, you can see right here, I want to give a shout out because I can't show these. This is so cool. Ash submitted this super emoji thing. And with the software that I use, I can see now, you can see it describes what this is the first time I'm using a software program called Ecamm, and I go through Restream. And so I can't just pull up the cool little emoji that Ash posted here. And so it describes it as a pair character turning around, waving his hand, saying, "Hey, you," while lowering his glasses. Does that sound right? I think so. So awesome. Big shout out to Ash. That's hilarious with that super chat. Very cool. That's fun. Why not? Why can't we have fun? This process can be pretty painful and stressful for people all over the world. All right. Let's jump into a few questions. Okay. So this is an interesting one. And I don't know, Alicia, if you have any responses for Skywalker here. I don't know if it's Luke or who it is, but Skywalker says, "Hello, I applied for my study permit today. I received a passport request on my GC Key account, so they want it for which reason? I'm a first-time applicant." So same day getting a passport request. Skywalker. Yeah. Alicia, do you have any clue?
Or maybe the study permit was submitted a while ago and finally they're receiving the passport request today. That could be too.
Well, he said I applied for my study permit today. Or I applied for my study permit and then today. Oh, there could be an emphasis on the wrong syllable. Okay.
There could be a comma. Yeah, an implied comma.
Okay. I was like, holy cow. Well, that's shocking considering the processing time as it is right now. But so yeah, what are your thoughts, Alicia?
Basically, Skywalker, if you are from a country where you are required to have a visa in your passport in order to come to Canada, then immigration is going to be asking you to submit your passport so that they can actually put in a visitor visa in there or a study visa in there, so that you're able to come to be able to fly and enter through the port of entry. So the airline's going to want to see that, and then also the border officer, when you get here, is going to want to make sure that you properly have the visa affixed in your passport. You'll have the letter of approval regarding your study permit also. Make sure that you still have the letter of acceptance from the school, proof that you can still pay the tuition, other documents to prove the legitimacy of your application for that study permit. And the officer at the border is going to actually quiz you and then decide whether to issue you that study permit. And so the visa in your passport is what gets you to the port of entry in Canada, and then the officer, when they're adjudicating your entry, is the person who's actually going to issue you that study permit or not. it does sometimes happen that people refuse the study permit when they come to the border. So you do have to be careful to make sure everything is still accurate and true and as you have represented it.
All right, let's jump to the next one. This is Joseph. He says, I've applied for a study permit. I live in Europe. My question is the processing time the same as India or is it different? So this one's a pretty simple, straightforward one here, but let's just pull it up. So if you go IRCC processing times, and then you click on the link right here, you can then search for visit study work. You said you're outside of Canada, so you choose study permit from outside Canada right there. And then when you click processing times, you can see that they do not distinguish countries. So this is an average across the board, which I find really, it's almost as frustrating as what they're posting for visitor visas and things like that. But anyways, 12 weeks is what they have from outside Canada all over the map. So what are your thoughts, Alicia, on are the processing times from Europe likely to be the same in terms of the high length of time it takes to process from India?
It's probably going to be a little bit lower, but it does depend on which country you're applying from. And it also depends on which office is actually going to be making a decision on your application because they've reallocated things basically based on which offices have ability to process or enough capacity to process. And so most of the time, if you're, let's say, I don't know, let's say you live in France, then you have an office in the past that was responsible for processing applications through France. But things have kind of changed a little bit with all of our online processing, and it tends to get allocated to the office that has capacity. So it does vary. You can also take a look, and I think we've put this in some of our blog articles, but you can historically take a look at which countries tend to have higher or lower rates of study permit approvals and what the volume is for applications through those countries. And that kind of gives you at least a historical snapshot of what kind of countries or nationalities of people were getting approved for study permits in the last few years.
Perfect. And the good thing about getting to those questions early is we've got a follow-up for Skywalker who clarifies, I applied for the study permit in September and received the passport request today. Okay. And that's good. Okay. So September, October, November. So we are into November and we don't know where Skywalker, I don't know if we know where the application was submitted from. I can't remember. But if we go back here and we look processing times, you can see processing times generally 12 weeks is what they list here. And so if Skywalker is saying that he submitted the study permit was submitted in September and received the passport request today, well, that's even a little bit quicker than what the processing times say. So interesting. Okay, G2D2 is back at it again. Man, G2D2. That's got to be R2D2. You got to change that to R2D2. Have CRS-based draws any chance to continue after Bill C-19? So what do you think, Alicia? If the minister goes to these targeted draws, is there, if people have just high human capital, do they still have a shot? What do you think?
I would guess so. I mean, I think probably if they do targeted draws, it's not going to be every single draw is going to be a targeted draw. I would guess that they have subsets of targeted draws. They could even do, we're going to do a CRS of this, and then we're going to fill up some of the slots with a targeted draw. So we don't know, but I would assume that having those high CRS is still going to be a leg up in terms of whether you get that ITA.
All right, let's jump in. We got a lot of really good questions today, Alicia. So Ash says, Mark and Alicia, thanks for acknowledging. Oh, I already got that one, didn't I? Oh, no. He says, thanks for acknowledging my super sticker. Immigration question aside, which is your favorite drink at Tim Hortons? I used to work there when I was a student in Canada. What's your favorite drink, Alicia?
It's got to be the steep tea. That's what I drink at Tim Hortons.
And for me, it's actually the white chocolate milk. So that's what I like. That's my favorite. So there you go, Ash. Hey, when you do supers like that, those little those little I don't even, what do you call that thing? I've never seen it. Igor sets this stuff up, you guys. Like I don't even know half of the time what's going on. So all right. Biniam says, hi family. What is the advantage of giving an upfront medical in the study permit processing? Like for study permit processing times, is there an advantage of giving an upfront medical?
And sometimes you have to, right? So if you're doing SDS, you absolutely have to provide that upfront medical under student direct stream. So keep in mind that sometimes you're required to provide that upfront medical. The other reason that you have the upfront medical is that if for some reason you are found to be medically inadmissible or have a condition that could make you medically admissible, you want to know that before you've paid thousands of dollars in international tuition fees, right? If you know that you have no chance at actually coming to Canada and having any sort of pathway to permanent residency eventually, it is better to know that up front rather than later. And depending on the medical condition, sometimes it's something that if you hire good lawyers, if you hire, doctors who can help you understand your condition and manage it, then maybe there is an argument to be made with respect to medical inadmissibility and excessive demand. But immigration wants to screen people out who could be medically inadmissible as soon as possible in the process.
All right. Let's see. Okay, here's a good question. This one's from M and Deep. He says, "Hi, Mark. Is it allowed to, I think, list non-accompanying spouse on a dependent work permit in Canada for extra points? So any chance of misrep, or what could be best explanation?" So what's happening here, for those of you who are unfamiliar with this, is sometimes you're prejudiced because you have a spouse, and sometimes your spouse does not have as high a human capital as you do. And so by listing them as non-accompanying, you're treated as an individual applicant. And essentially it can mean the difference between, up to almost 40 points swing if you list your spouse or you don't. So some people choose to list their spouse as non-accompanying, get their ITA, go through the PR process, and then sponsor them after they become a permanent resident. But listing a spouse who's non-accompanying when they're already here with you on a dependent work permit, that's the question. So Alicia, what do you think for this one from Amandeep?
Yeah, so for sure you have to acknowledge the fact that you're married. You've got to declare and provide the name and the birth date and the details of your spouse and your family members. But it is up to you in terms of whether you decide to list them as accompanying or non-accompanying in terms of the express entry application. And there are ramifications for that choice, right? So as long as you're properly declaring and you're not trying to hide the spouse, you're not misrepresenting that you do have a spouse, but it is up to you to decide whether to include them. And sometimes people need to do that because their only shot at PR is if the principal applicant has enough points, if the spouse doesn't have high language skills or maybe high education. And if you do that, though, it means that it's going to be the processing time for your PR application and making sure that that gets finalized before you can turn around and then go and sponsor your spouse. And it's a longer road for sure. It's another application, so other application fees and then the processing times for that spousal sponsorship. And it's possible they may not continue to extend that spouse's visa, right? So that spouse may actually have to go back to their home country if you're going to get your PR and then turn around and sponsor them. So there are for sure things to weigh in terms of the family dynamics and what are the choices involved in choosing to include them or not include them in the application now.
All right, let's go to our next super. This is from Rashid. And Rashid says, if after a TR to PR application is submitted, one of the dependents gets cancer, is it compulsory to declare to IRCC? Will it disqualify the application?
Mm-hmm. Yes, Rashid, you've got to disclose that, right? It's a material change in circumstances because part of that TR to PR application, you've got to go through that medical examination. And if this is something that's new and you know about it, then you have to tell immigration. Now, will it disqualify you for medical inadmissibility for excessive demand? Possibly. And so this is where you're going to want to make sure that you talk to an immigration lawyer who has a strong background in assessing medical inadmissibilities. And you're going to have to work with your oncologist or your family oncologist, their cancer treatment doctors, and the team that's involved because some cancers are more serious than others, right? It might be, I don't know, let's say it's skin cancer and you can just have that mole removed and it hasn't metastasized, and maybe it's something that's really treatable and it's not going to be over that excessive demand threshold. But maybe it's something that's much more serious and requires surgery or radiation and chemotherapy, and that has a big price ticket associated with it. So I would really recommend that you do reach out to lawyers who deal with medical inadmissibility on a regular basis, and work with your medical team to be able to provide a solid response or a solid disclosure when you do that with immigration.
Yeah. All right. Next super chat. This is from Lovey Dovey. Is implied status automatic after an EAPR? Please explain. So this is,
No, I
do
mean,
I have to do anything to extend my temporary stay, or am I good to go?
no, like you need to make sure that you maintain your temporary resident status, and that's completely separate from your PR application. So the onus is entirely on you to make sure that you are eligible for a work permit. Sometimes, depending on what your status was prior to submitting your application for permanent residence under express entry, sometimes you are able to apply for a bridging open work permit once you have your acknowledgement of receipt, the fact that you filed your EAPR, but only in some circumstances, and depending on whether you have a provincial nomination, sometimes it's not a bridging open work permit. In fact, it's a closed 204C, so the regulation 204C work permit. And those things you really have to get right. Otherwise, your work permit application can be refused. If your work permit application is refused, or if you lose your status, then you need to leave, and you can, I mean, you can notify immigration that you've left and here's your new address, and they can continue to process your application, but you don't want to be in a situation where you're an overstay.
All right. Oh, here's a good one. Okay, Peters. He says, "Good morning, Mark. I'm David." That's right. David from Hill Spring. Had a consult with you about a month ago. I'm working hard on my GED. I hope to get it done in a month. And then I'm going to need your help. Keep in touch. Absolutely. I'll give you some applause, Peter. Good luck on that. And for those of you who are following in, the GED is the high school equivalent. And that's one of the requirements that the province of Alberta and the Alberta Advantage Immigration Program that they need as a minimum. So good to see you, David, and I look forward to connecting with you. Just close here, nestled in the mountains, is the fine little town of Hill Spring. So very cool. It's got a nice little name. It's in the hills and it's got a nice spring. All right. Okay, let's see what's next here. Let's get this one from Sana. Sana says, "I'm from Pakistan, IT professional in multinational company." Okay, we've seen a lot of those ones. "My employer is US based, but has clients in Canada. Is it possible to get a work permit based on a US company in Canada?"
Maybe in some circumstances. I mean, there's a lot of things that need to be explored here. So, depending on where you've worked, how long you've worked in that position, what the seniority of that position was, in some circumstances, you are able to do an intercompany transfer, but not usually if the company doesn't have a physical operation and an office in Canada with existing Canadian employees. So, please book a consult, Sana, and we can discuss what some of the moving parts are with this. But in a lot of cases, especially IT companies, they don't normally have a physical presence in Canada, and that causes a big problem.
All right, next question is from Bruno. He says, "Can I apply for express entry while holding a study permit? And if accepted, can I continue my studies and continue to work full time after December 2023 when they bring the 20 plus hour limitation back?" There's a lot to that one.
Bruno, I'd say please book a consult. We can talk about it in detail. If you have a study permit, that's great, right? That's usually the first step. And if you take a little look at some of the videos we've done and the explainer videos, 4 ways to immigrate in 4 minutes, so having a study permit is great. It's the way that you can set yourself up to make sure that you are getting that Canadian education credential points. But you've got to make sure that the fact that you're working part-time is not jeopardizing your ability to successfully complete your program of studies. And then you can't rely on that work experience while you're a full-time student towards express entry. So you have to complete your studies. You've got to graduate from your program. I really, really hope that your program is 2 years and you're eligible for a postgrad work permit for 3 years. But make sure that the day that you apply for that postgrad work permit is the day that you can start counting your Canadian work experience, as long as it's high skilled. You can't count any of this study permit work in the meantime. So be careful about that, because depending on your CRS score, most people need to have that Canadian work experience unless you have foreign work experience and quite high language scores.
All right, Alicia, we still have to keep answering this question. Do you
Yes, we
offer
do.
express entry application services?
We absolutely do. So we work with people all the time on express entry applications. This is what we do. So we have a collaborative review approach, and the good news is you are still in control of your application. We don't take over your application. We don't take your password. We don't mess around with your profile without you knowing ever. So what you do is we have Mark's do-it-yourself course. You get access to that when you hire us. And we have a shared folder on from our law firm, and we collaborate with you on an individual basis. It's Mark or me or Cedric or Chanel that's working with you directly to review all of your documents, to understand your situation, to really make sure that you're properly setting up your Express Entry profile so that you can be sure that if you do get an ITA, you've gotten an ITA when you should have gotten an ITA. Because a lot of people make a serious mistake in that express entry profile. And it is much, much better to have spoken with a lawyer, retained somebody ahead of time so that you know that you're getting it set up properly, especially now with all the changes from the old NOC 2016 to the new tier. That's causing quite a bit of confusion for a lot of people.
Yep. And with any change that the government makes within express entry, we get things like this, right, Shelley? So Shelley says, hey, Mark, there's a technical glitch in the spouse work experience section in the new express entry website. So as far as new, there is no new express entry website unless I'm somehow missing something, Shelley, but they did update and make changes to accommodate for tier. And so it's not surprising that in their race to try to get things turned over and the way they love for us to be their beta testers, that there is glitches. So I can guarantee that through the CBA, we have a specific liaison person that's kind of the IRCC portal person, and that information will definitely be relayed back to them, and I'm sure it already has. It says the system is not adding the spouse Canadian work experience points in the profile. Will they fix it? So yes, Shelley, and this is one of the advantages to the various associations. And I don't know if CAPIC has that for the consultants, but for the Canadian Bar Association and ACADI, the Quebec Immigration Lawyer Association, we have individuals that that connects with IRCC at whenever we see these problems arising, because they just, for whatever reason, can't see the same thing that we see on our side. Their back end looks different, and so they often don't even know sometimes when the portal isn't working properly. Yes, I know. How can a government have a system that they have so many people accessing it that they don't know what's going on? But we tend to provide a lot of feedback. So Shelley, I'll reach out to CBA and just see if anyone has experienced any problems with that. And because it was a disaster the last day, well, yesterday it was like glitching and a whole bunch of problems. So it may already have been rectified. But thanks, Shelley, for letting us know about that.
And Shelley, they usually also ask for a screenshot of the problem so you can redact your personal information, but just show exactly which profile page and where it shows up. And then that's something that they can send to their technical team.
All right, let's pull up this super from Sarav. He says, I had no New Brunswick PNP nomination in skilled worker stream. Okay. And I applied for the work permit extension as my postgrad work permit was expiring in July 2022. I'm assuming this year. And I got a closed one. But can I apply for a postgrad work permit extension now? So there's a couple pieces here, Sarav, that we don't know. And but generally speaking, Alicia, do you want to try to tackle this kind of at a higher level? Just some of the nuances of these nominations and bridging
Yeah,
work
so
permits?
so normally you have one postgrad work permit and it's over forever. And usually the only exception to that is if your passport was expiring and you should have been eligible for 3 years, but your passport expired earlier, then you can do what's called a recapture of time application and get the full 3 years once you have the new passport. However, once you've moved away from that postgrad work permit, so there were a few public policies during COVID in order to try to give more time on postgrad work permits, and that was a complete departure from what the normal law says. And it only was within certain parameters within certain time periods. If you were eligible for one of those programs, you would have had to fit exactly within those programs. But if you transitioned off of that postgrad work permit to a closed, or it must have been a PNP Regulation 204C supported work permit. So if you have a closed work permit right now, there is basically no way you can go back to a new public policy postgrad work permit 18-month open. So you'd have to look at doing another closed 204C extension application and get another letter from the New Brunswick PNP program to support another extension on that application, which means you probably have to be working for that same employer who originally nominated you, and that can get tricky depending
A little
on if
sticky.
there's been any changes in that situation. So we would definitely recommend that you speak with us. If you're not working for the same employer that you were working for when you originally submitted your PNP application or your express entry. So be careful with that.
Indeed. And this is, we're going to keep pushing you guys here when you have specific questions, because it's just not possible for Alicia and I to be able to properly address this kind of stuff. However, there are certain things that we definitely can. And Priscilla's question is exactly what I want to address. So with an offer from a private college that is DLI, but no postgrad work permit eligible, I'm going to be able to work 20 hours or more for the 1 year of study. I have been advised, I love that. I wonder who probably advised her. I know who did. Just a second.
I wonder what Mark is bringing over.
This is who freaking advised her right here. George. Right, George? Ah. Okay, I don't even have my hand in properly. This is, normally I haven't pulled George out for a long time, but I can't help myself. Right, George? Okay, so George is going to answer this question, aren't you, George? Yeah, he's going to answer it. So someone advised her that if she goes to a DLI, remember, Priscilla is not going to get a postgrad work permit. So she's going to spend, I don't know, $20,000, probably less given the fact, right, George? Probably less. Who knows? We don't know where she's going to school. But she knows that while you're in a DLI going to school, you can work 20 hours. We know there's some rule changes that have come into place that really freak me out, that grant people the ability to work full time, but we won't get into that right now. But George, she says that she's been advised that she can get a work permit based on her 1 year work experience. George, did you advise her to do that? Yeah, it was George. I think George was the one. Dumb George. Dumb. Okay. See you, George. All right. So back to the question here. We don't have all the information. We don't. But to start off with, one of the things that really, really troubles me is when people are willing to pay tons of money to go to a private school, and I can't speak to the value or the worth of the program that the person is taking. Maybe it's a great program. I don't know. But the reality is you pay all that money to come to Canada. And if you truly intend on going back home, then fine, do whatever you want to do. But if you want to have a pathway to permanent residence, not having an eligibility for a postgrad work permit, well, let alone 1 year of study, I wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole if your intention is to become a permanent resident. You need that. And we advise our clients at least 2 years should really be the minimum if you're looking to pursue PR. But the part that gives me the most trouble here is that someone is trying to say that because you have, you can get a work permit based on your 1 year of work experience. Like, I don't know what that advice was, but Alicia, talk me back from the ledge here, because I just want to scream. I just want to scream.
Priscilla, this is all bad, right?
Save that one from Halloween.
There you go. The Halloween scream comes back. This is all bad. So, the government has issued some relaxed rules in very specific parameters. And maybe, Mark, you can pull up Chanel's article on the study permits and the fact that people can work, because it's not a blank slate. It's not the fact that you can't circumvent the normal rules, right? I'm trying to figure out where it is. It's not that long ago. It was when they announced
No.
it, but it might be on the older post page. Where did
I'll
it
search
go?
for it.
Okay. So the tricky thing here is that only certain students are authorized to work off campus. There are two different subsections in the regulations. And so it's only people who are already authorized to work off campus who can potentially be eligible for these new temporary public policies. The other thing is, this only actually kicked in November 15th, 2 days ago, right? So you can't have been working from when they announced it unless November 15th rolled around. So that's another thing that's going to trip people up, and they might have unauthorized work because they didn't properly read this. So be very careful. Um, does the temporary measure apply to me, right? It has to be people who are already currently in Canada, have already submitted the study permit application, right? So many of the post-secondary international students are authorized for off-campus work, but most of those are also tied to a DLI that is PGWP eligible. So be very, very careful, right? You can't start working on this until November 15th. You have to already have been in Canada. And it's only under specific circumstances under the regulations that people could be authorized to work off campus. So you have to comply with all the regular conditions on that study permit as well. And then no, it is not going to count for express entry. So that work that you do, even if you do meet all the other requirements, is never going to qualify you for Canadian work experience for express entry points. And so where is the pathway? Like it's a dead end. And you're spending thousands of dollars for something that's a dead end.
And obviously, Priscilla, we don't know all the background. We don't want to have all the details. And I've learned my lesson before when I had a lawsuit threatened against me for, saying some comments that I didn't fully understand the background for. And that's why we have to be so careful. And that's why we always direct you guys back here to our website when we have specific questions like this, to speak to a lawyer so that we can get all the details and properly advise you. But like Alicia said, just generally speaking, I never advise anyone to take a 1-year program, even if it offers a post-grad work permit, because there just isn't enough time to go through the process. Just ask the 200,000 international students that are kind of stuck here wondering what their PR futures are with no CEC draws and no ability to get an ITA. So really, really, really scary. Okay. Sana says, thank you, Mark and Alicia, for answering my question. I appreciate that. I will definitely book a consultation with you. Regards, Sana. You bet. And it's super easy. Sana, just slide over the site, click on Alicia's 25-minute consult right here, and you can get in. Really, it's pretty quick. Alicia, she's swamped tomorrow, but she'll be right back at it on the 21st. And so you can easily click there and get connected in to book a consult with Alicia. All right. Okay. Next on our list here, let's see. We have Josephich, and he says, I work as an admin assistant at a college in Winnipeg. Is that exempt from medical? So maybe talk just briefly about the restrictions on medicals and who needs them. And we'll try to keep it general, Josephich, because there's a whole bunch of different factors that you haven't described here that would also impact on your situation as to whether you're exempt. But generally speaking, Alicia, do you want to try to tackle that one?
Yeah. So some people, if they didn't have to submit a medical upfront in the past, they might already be here. They might already be working on a postgrad work permit, for example. And most of the time, you're going to have a condition on your work permit itself that says not authorized to work in healthcare, not authorized to work with children, not authorized to work with, elderly, for example. Um, that is the standard condition unless you've actually gone and had an immigration medical done. So certain occupations, so when you do your online application for a work permit from inside Canada, there's a list and it says, will you be working in one of these occupations with children, with high risk groups, with elderly, with healthcare? There are certain things where it's a higher risk if you were in one of those occupations, and therefore they say you should get a medical done as part of your work permit application. But if you're working as, an admin assistant at a college, that's probably not one of the ones that's on the list. And so you probably wouldn't have had to do it up front. But if you are in an occupation or will be changing to a new occupation that would require you to be in a higher risk situation involving other individuals, then you will need to go get those conditions on your work permit changed. So basically, you need to do an immigration medical and then apply to change conditions and update your work permit and get that reissued. So if you are in a different occupation, you may need it. If you're not doing anything that requires, and you can go to IRCC, they actually have a little drop down on medical requirements and who needs them. You can do a double check for that.
You bet. All right. Next question here. Let me just see. I'm going to pull up Ferry here. So here's Todd Ferry. He says, "Hey guys, Alicia's background is amazing. Is that real?"
Like my
I'm
physical
assuming.
background? Yeah, like this is the hibiscus, yeah.
I'm going to go out on a limb, Todd, and I'm going to assume that maybe you were looking at Alicia's like professional background, maybe. And if you guys want to know who is Mark, who is Alicia, who is Chanel, and who is Cedric, all you have to do is go to our firm website, click on About Us and our team, and you can learn about us. And so if you go to Alicia's About Her, yeah, her background is phenomenal. It's amazing. This is actually a little outdated. We need to update it. Hey, Alicia.
It's
So she
true.
says she's been practicing for about 18 years. It's been longer than that. Called to the bar in 2003. I was called to the bar in 2005. So Alicia's got 2 years on me. And she's done a bunch of things, medium-sized firms, boutique immigration firms, a sole practitioner. She's worked in community legal, nonprofit poverty law clinic prior to joining our firm here. And you can see all the things that she's done, individuals and corporations, temporary permanent resident application, but not just that. If you look down to all of her history, she's been involved in court tribunals, federal court, provincial, Court of Queen's Bench, IRB, the ID, and the IAD, all these different administrative bodies. And so Alicia's got all of this background that I think people just don't look at. And there's a reason that we put it there. It's because that's what infuses our ability to be able to provide advice. So when you go to our website, like for Alicia here, if you go to speak to a lawyer and you say, "Oh my goodness, Alicia, she charges $300, essentially plus the $15 for tax for a 25-minute consult," there is a reason for that, you guys. Because in that short 25-minute consultation, Alicia brings the full weight of her background and her years and years of experience in immigration to bear when she's providing advice. And then I just always direct people, go back and take a look at our Google reviews, and you can see what people have to say about what we do in real life with our clients that hire us to help them with their applications and book consults. So thanks, Todd. I don't know if that's what you meant or her background was amazing, but either way, you got the full force of it. Okay. I love this one. Amongst Us. Isn't it Among Us? Isn't that the game the kids play or something? I think my daughter played that for quite a while. Then we tried to wean her off of it because she was so hooked on it. But anyways, she's now too busy studying in grade 12 for actual core courses. So she doesn't have much time to do anything other than that right now. But okay, Sus says, "How official do pay stubs have to look? Because mine looks like a battlefield." So what are your thoughts on that, Alicia?
Well, yeah, I mean, the funny thing is too, my kids were explaining to me, what's sus and what's not sus. And so sometimes those pay stubs might look sus, as in suspect, right?
Suspect.
And so if it is suspect and it doesn't look like they're real pay stubs, then you probably want to do a little bit of providing some other sources of information. So you might want to provide your tax documentation, or you might want to show that you have your bank account balance showing that you're getting paid from the corporation on a regular basis, showing up on that bank account balance, for example. So cross-reference things to be able to prove that this is legitimate.
Yes. Okay, next super chat. This one comes from Dinma. "Thank you, Mark and Alicia. I have my PR now and looking out for the future. Are medicals required for citizenship applications?" Well, I'm going to start off with some applause, Dinma. Congratulations on getting your permanent residence. That is awesome. But citizenship, Alicia, do they care about medicals at that stage?
No, you're a Canadian PR, so you can't be medically inadmissible once you're a permanent resident. So that is all done and over with. But you do need to be able to pass the knowledge test, right? So you need to be able to understand a little bit about Canadian history and background and have sufficient language in order to be able to um, to become a Canadian citizen. You also have to have enough physical residency. So you have to be able to prove that you have basically 3 years of Canadian permanent resident physical presence in Canada in order to be able to apply for citizenship. The thing that can make you inadmissible is if you have any sort of criminal charge or conviction, well, certain types of criminal charges or convictions, or if you have misrepresented about anything that allowed you to obtain PR in the first place. So those are all things that could for sure be problems, but medicals are not one of them.
Yes. All right. Okay. So this is a message. Oh yes, Bree. Hello, Bree, over in Halifax. She gives us a virtual hug here, Alicia. I can't help it. Man, we really miss out, I think, when we're not looking at these. So here's the virtual hug right here. So I'll click on, here it is. There it is. There's the virtual hug from Bree. So thanks, Bree. Okay. So the question is, do you really need to inform IRCC about a job change if your PR application is in the background stage? Thanks, Mark and Alicia. Bree from Halifax.
Mark, do you know what background stage would mean in this
Uh,
context? Like how
I'm,
far
I
along?
think what she means probably is, it's the security stage. So
Mm,
everything with the application has already been assessed, and now they're just doing their final, medical checks and police clearance checks before finalizing the application. So what she means is they've already assessed my work history. There's nothing that's going to impact on my eligibility, or, they've already accepted it. And now I'm changing a job. Like, do I need to notify them? And this is one good point I want to bring up too before I turn it over to you. The TR to PR pathway, especially in the context of, I'm trying to remember what the person's situation was. Now it's fled my mind. TR to PR, there is no meaningful way to update it. So if you have a situation like it was the cancer situation, how are you supposed to update them? Because they actively discourage you from submitting anything that's not solicited. So it becomes really difficult. But even in those circumstances, you're still going to use a web form to do it, to cover your bases. But Alicia, in this situation, what do you think? What would your advice be?
yeah, so anything that could be material that could impact your application that would change your points or change your eligibility, you must communicate to immigration. And so, Bree, I don't know which category you applied under. I don't know if you were relying on arranged employment points for a job offer. I don't know if you had a PNP nomination. Um, I don't know what your work permit status is and whether it's tied to a closed LMIA supported work permit, for example. But all of those things are potentially things that could impact your ability to get PR, especially if you did claim arranged employment, those job offer points. That's one that is super, super important. So if you had a job offer with company A when you initially submitted that application and you changed that job, that could completely tank your application. So um, please reach out and book a consult with us if there's, we can't give advice without knowing more. In general, you must notify immigration about changes in your personal circumstances that could affect your points or your eligibility for a program.
Yes. I'll jump in, Alicia, and answer this one. So Johnson says, hello, Mark, does the tier system give more points for nurses? No, Johnson, the tier system is just another way, an updated version of categorizing all the occupations across the country. So some positions were on the loser list, and there were just 3 of them, I think, that actually, because of the changes, dropped out of what would be considered a skilled occupation for the purposes of the economic PR programs in Canada. There were just few, but there were some that you weren't getting any points for that have been elevated. I think there were 16 or so different occupations, including, personal care attendants, heavy equipment operators, things like that, long haul truck drivers. Those positions traditionally were not considered to be skilled for the purposes of PR. So they got points, but nurses have always been there and are still there. So there's no extra points given per se for nurses. Now, we don't know what the minister's going to do. And where's the minister? He's right here. He's always with me. Here he comes. Oh, hello, minister. Welcome. I need to bring the minister over for Alicia and I when we're on our screen here. But the reality is he could target specifically nurses, right? And so maybe he does come up and say, if you're a nurse, you get an extra 50 points. Although, who knows? The ability is there, I guess. But
And it is interesting, specifically for Alberta, because Alberta has actually entered into a memorandum of understanding, so an MOU with the Philippines to try to bring over Filipino nurses because we know we have nowhere near the nursing staff that we need as a province. And so there are kind of movements afoot to make sure that we are properly staffing up for nurses and other healthcare aides and attendants. So
Mhm.
it is interesting to see how that will play out.
You bet. I did a quick search. I was going to go through Google and just pull up the actual report, but I see CBC and the other ones are posting it. But I was threatened a lawsuit because I used an image for one of the newspapers. So screw them. I'm not going to give them any credence at all, other than the Google search result. But you can see here. I'm sorry. I'm a little bitter with the stupid Canadian news media. I, yeah, I won't get into the issues. Whatever you do, don't take an image from any of the newspapers and then post it on something that's internally yours, and maybe even this live stream. So that's why you don't see me sharing anything from the news media other than directly from the government websites. But you can see here, province signs MOU with the Philippines in an effort to attract more nurses is the key from to fill the labor shortages in Alberta. So there you go. All right. Next on our list here is Kiridi says, my work permit is expiring this month and I am eligible for an extension under the new public policy. I'm assuming post-grad here. Can I do a flagpole before my work permit expires to get the extension?
No, don't do it. Absolutely not. You will probably lose all ability to work in Canada and be sent home.
Yes.
Um, yeah, no, this is serious. So the public policy clearly says it has to be an online application. You are not allowed to go and do a flagpole or apply at the physical port of entry. In fact, if you do that, then it is entirely possible that you will lose what status you may have remaining and will be turned around and sent home. So make sure that you do your online application. Mark has created a course on how do you properly do that 18-month public policy open work permit when you had a valid PGWP. So make sure that you do this and do it pretty soon because this is all going to go away as of next month, right? The
Oh, it's already
deadline for
gone away,
applying.
Alicia. Apparently it's already gone. That course.
Where did the
We're
course
calling
go,
out a whole
Mark?
bunch of things on the site. So I thought something was missing. It looks like that one is gone. So maybe we'll pull it back up.
All right. So, yes, you do have to apply. You have to apply online if you're eligible and make sure that you stay in the country. Do not leave.
Yes. All right. So what's the best time, Alicia, to apply for any temporary permit before the existing one expires? Thanks. You are both amazing. That's how
So,
you get your question answered.
this is really tricky to give a kind of umbrella answer for this question. So I know that IRCC always says you have to apply 30 days before your status expires. That's not based on the law, but it is a recommendation because a lot of times people don't realize that there's more involved than they think there is in terms of doing an extension application. The other thing is it really, really depends what kind of temporary permit you have, right? Temporary permits could be visitor visas or records, or it could be a study permit, or it could be a work permit. And if it's a work permit, then you may not be eligible for a different category of work permit, right? If you had a PGWP and that was one and done, or if it's not within the parameters of the new public policy, maybe there is no way to get another open work permit. So now you're looking at a closed work permit. So you've got to find an employer who's going to go through that LMIA process. And labor market impact assessment processes take a lot of time, at least 4 weeks of advertising and recruiting, plus at least probably about 2 months for ESDC to make a decision. So you're looking at least 3 months. And depending on where you are, if you need to have a visa in addition to your work permit, then that's something that you'll have to make sure that you include in your application if you're visa required. So um, lots of things to consider with that.
Absolutely. All right. Todd Ferry comes back here. He says, can a couple spouses apply as federal skilled workers separately instead of main applicant and accompanying, both as the main applicants from outside Canada? So we've had this question happen a lot in the past.
Yeah, so you're not allowed to have two express entry profiles, but you can have each spouse apply as the principal applicant. So let's say the husband's going to create their profile as the principal applicant and the wife's going to create their profile as the principal applicant. And depending on, and this is probably something that's going to happen more and more with targeted draws, right? Because it may not be just straight CRS scores that are getting drawn. Maybe it's because one person has experience in a certain occupation that for some reason they're going to say is economically in demand in Canada. So yes, both people can create their profiles. You can see who gets chosen first under an invitation to apply. But then once you actually submit an electronic application for permanent residence, you can't have two ongoing at the same time. So both people can create profiles. You can see, you can maximize your chances for who's going to maybe get an ITA. But once you actually finalize and submit that EAPR, you got to choose.
Exactly. All right, and this will be the last thing that I'll just touch on as we wrap up our live Q&A today. My very smartphone says, okay, smartphone. Hello, Mark and Alicia. Do you have any advice, resources to help me write my LOE? I'm applying for EE under the Federal Skilled Worker Program. It's right here, my friend. And I've actually gone right in and opened up the course. This is what you will see. So the Express Entry course, which is going to be, it's open right now. The master class will start at the end of the month. If you go down here, you will see mastering your documents, this section right here. If you scroll down, not one page of mastering your documents, there's actually two, all the way down to lesson 54, letters of explanation. I go through and spend almost half an hour alone talking about the process that I recommend people follow, including templates for letters of explanation that work both for documents and for the EAPR information. So I have two. And there's lots of information, explanations in here, and it is all available. And like I said, within the course itself, all you have to do is click on the link below, and you'll see that we do have our upcoming courses. Spousal sponsorship is next week. Study permit, we're taking early pre-sale registrations. If you subscribe before December the 1st, there's going to be $200, so you save $50. And the Express Entry course, which is open right now as well, which I strongly encourage you to subscribe now. Go through all of those videos. So when the masterclass comes, you've got all of those most difficult questions all queued up, because really, until you start going through the videos, you don't know what you don't know, and you don't know the personal circumstances that you need to kind of be clarified. And we do that all in these subscription, only master classes associated with the course. So go check that out. All right. So Alicia, any last comments as we wrap up an awesome live session today of our weekly Q&A here on Thursday mornings? Any additional information? Todd, thank you for answering my question. Mark and Alicia, my superheroes always. Well, I'll give you an applause for that. Any last comments, Alicia?
Yeah, I just saw there was a comment from Knight, and so please, Knight, go and make sure that you check the policy interpretations of an intervening birthday in Express Entry and your immigration's policy in terms of when they recognize that birthday relative to your EAPR and to your ITA. So make sure that you check that so that you're 100% sure of what's going on. If you're not sure, then please book a consult and we will go through the facts with you carefully.
You bet. And I'll just show you very quickly. If you search for this, Express Entry, assessing an electronic application under A11.2, and then you scroll down here, there's a specific topic. Maybe I blew past it already, right here.
Yep, right there.
Exemption for birthdays. So you can check that out, and there's clear policy directives on that. All right. This is pretty good. Well, let's see. I'll keep it down just a little bit. We're going to wrap this up with turning it up to 11. And I want to give a special shout out to this character right here, who is Harris Heller, the founder of Stream Beats, and he's the producer of this fancy dancy music. Copyright free music for Twitch streamers and YouTubers, which apparently I'm a YouTuber, Alicia. Thanks, Harris. Thanks, everybody. Take care, and we'll see you again next week.